the very end. Is that done by you again, or shall we close the session?
I mean, up to you. I'll be here. I can jump again, and I want to thank you though. So I will come back
Okay, cool.
at the end of the session. I'll be there. We will close it together.
Perfect.
Here we go. And
just so I opened the chat. I just see the. I see the overview, but I don't see a chat on the website.
Yeah, make sure you click on subscribe or inscription according to the language you're using.
Register.
Yeah, and try to register manually. It's the easiest way. And then you click on chat. Normally you can see. Refresh each time to have the new ones. The chat is also happening in other places. This is why I'll be making sure to centralize it for you guys by speaking to each time about something new. I'm doing in the meantime also preparing the live. This is why I'm here we go.
No worries.
Calling my colleague to be aligned with us.
Okay. I still don't see the chat. I signed up. And where am I supposed to see it? Chat. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, if you wanna stop sharing your screen, Benny, and you can reshare it again once we.
I'll set up in.
All right, guys. So we will be going in 1 minute live. We have another person joining, Lawrence.
Yeah, I've just seen it. There's actually a guy from Swiss Contact, and maybe he didn't understand. Join here; it would be easier.
Hi, Larry.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Lawrence. How are you? We're going live in a few seconds.
Excellent.
How are you?
Do you guys know each other yet?
Nope, first time.
Okay, Larry, Sumaya, Lawrence. Sorry, I'm familiar with Lawrence. We studied together.
So it's Lawrence, right? Am I pronouncing it right?
Exactly.
Perfect.
And actually, my wife is called Sumaya too, so it's.
Oh, beautiful name.
Yeah, it's kind of strange of having to work with Sumaya now professionally. So we'll have to see how it will work out. But okay.
Yep, we'll see how it goes.
And Sumaya, sorry to interrupt. I will have to leave already as of 1 o'clock, unfortunately. Okay.
Yep.
Well, just that you know, but don't worry about myself. The most important they're here. So.
All right. Let me. So a few logistics guys going on at the same time because we're launching that live. Now we should be live. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here with us today in our third session at Ins and Outs of Ecosystem Building. We're super excited to have new guests today. I'll be introducing a few. In the meantime, I also saw that we have new people in the audience that didn't join previously. So I want to quickly put the context and remind you all about what is this program about. Ins and Outs of Ecosystem Building is our way of also celebrating the Global Week of Entrepreneurship. This is actually a fruit of a collaboration between Smart Capital and Projet Innovi, European Union for Innovation. For that, we actually were thinking, what would be actually a very nice way to expose our ecosystem of startups in Tunisia globally? And one of the ideas that were there is to actually jump on calls with experts from all over the world that were leading the startup development, startup ecosystem development worldwide, and have them interact with our ecosystem. So this is the idea behind this program. We really hope you will make the best of it, by connecting with our speakers. It can be potential partnerships in the future, or mentorship opportunity, or even getting inspired by an idea or tips that will be shared in this session, and use it to solve your daily challenges in that sense. So this is the idea behind this program. We already had 2 sessions, and we're super excited about the session of today with Swiss Contact. Hello, everyone. Benny, Charlotte, and Lawrence.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Thank you for making it happen. So with no longer waiting, I will leave the floor to you guys. Benny, please let us know more. I know that Swiss Contact has a specific program for pushing entrepreneurship and innovation, etc. SSC, if I'm not mistaken. I will be really interested to know more about it, know more about your background, guys, because we made sure to add everything, your bio and all, on our websites, but it will be nice to hear it from you. One more thing, guys, before I leave the floor to Benny, the Q&A. So if you have any questions, it's gonna be interactive, so you can ask it right away, whether you are on our Facebook page or on the eVay platform. You can directly send your questions. I'll be here to help moderating that, so feel free to do that. I guess with no longer waiting, we're excited to hear what you have to share. Sounds good?
Sounds good. We are ready.
Perfect.
Thanks so much, Sumaya, for this kind introduction, and good day, everyone. Bonjour à tous, and welcome to our session. We are super excited to be here today with you, and to share the learnings we have from our project, and really talk about, let me just quickly open the presentation. So to talk about the role of startup support organization and ecosystem builders in developing a thriving ecosystem. So before we start, Sumaya have quickly introduced us. Let me present ourselves a bit more. So basically, I'm working for Swiss Contact, and Swiss Contact is a Swiss-based foundation, and we are working in over 30 countries worldwide. I think I can proudly say that as an organization, we do have quite a lot of experience, because last year we were actually celebrating the 60th anniversary, and the work we do around the world is quite broad as well. So it's all up from technical and vocational trainings to SME support to more about local development strategies. And in recent years, we also have been involved much more in promoting entrepreneurship and also ecosystem building. And as Sumaya was mentioning, I'm leading a project together with the Swiss bank Credit Suisse. And because ecosystem building has become such a popular topic over the last year, we thought it would be super interesting of having a project that has a global perspective in understanding what actually works around ecosystem building, what's the latest thinking of ecosystem building, and bring these learnings back to the global community. And I think it's a super good opportunity now to also share these experiences with you guys. And we feel that there is so much good stuff going on, and we still see that a lot of times, the wheels are being reinvented again and again. And I think one of the objective of the project I'm leading is really to make sure that this learning is spread worldwide, and we are actually, making use of what's already out there. So that's a little bit about my background. And I'm also want to give some space to Charlotte, who's joining me today, because she's leading the Swiss EP, which is another program Swiss Contact is doing. And I'll let Charlotte tell a bit more about that.
Sure. Thank you, Benny. And hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. So I'm the current global manager for the Swiss Entrepreneurship Program. We call it Swiss EP. It's a global program that supports development of emerging ecosystems in 7 countries. And I'll tell you a bit more later on the specific program. And before being the global manager, I was actually heading the program in Peru for 4.5 years. Before Peru, I worked in Colombia for Endeavor. It's a global organization that selects and accelerates high impact entrepreneurs. And you might know them because they are also in Tunisia. And before Colombia, I was in Switzerland working for the World Economic Forum, and specifically for a community called the Forum of Young Global Leaders. And it's basically leaders who are under the age of 40. They're CEOs, ministers, media leaders, artists, anyone, any background. And they're seeking to shape a better future. And that's when I started interacting with entrepreneurs, and that's where my passion for supporting entrepreneurs started. So again, very happy to be here, and I look forward to interacting during the session.
Well,
over to you, Benny.
For that introduction. And just to let you know, we also have a new project from Swiss Contact taking place in Tunisia, and that's why Lawrence is also here on the call. Maybe, Lawrence, do you want to say maybe 1 or 2 words or sentences around that new projects that Swiss Contact is doing in Tunisia?
Absolutely.
Amazing news.
Absolutely. So we do have a new project, a new program going on from Swiss Contact. It actually just started about 2 months ago. It's called Perspective. It's going to roll out officially in June out of next year. It's a program actually designed to engage and to mobilize the Tunisian diaspora worldwide, but especially in Switzerland. But it's going to take place especially in Switzerland, France, Italy, and Germany. And we're trying to get the Tunisian diaspora to invest precisely in the ecosystem, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Tunisia, which is why I'm thrilled to have the possibility to just participate in this session. So thank you very much for having me on board here.
Amazing. I mean, this is a great news. I heard some things about it, but it's pretty clear what's the context. I'm excited about that. I mean, you're talking now to the ecosystem right away. So if you have something to share, it's going to be also saved for a long time. So I'm happy this news is shared live in this session. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Sumaya.
All right, so let's jump into today's session. And the way we structured the presentation today is basically in 2 parts. So the first one is really about having a better understanding of what do we actually mean by a thriving ecosystem, right? We have So what does it mean that, you know, what is thriving ecosystem basically all about? So what are the basics around there? And then the second chapter is really more about understanding the role that you as startup support organization really can play in developing such a thriving ecosystem. And that one is really based around practical experience that we are having, and Charlotte will be talking about that. And as Sumaya already mentioned in the beginning, we will have a Q&A session after chapter 1 and after chapter 2. So if you have any questions as we go, please, you know, put them into the chat, and we will be then picking the questions you were having after those sessions and responding to those. If you don't have the time to go through all the questions, we can then also follow up after the webinar today. And then maybe another word, because we have been thinking around what is actually the correct title to use. And we came up with the word exploring. And that is not just a coincidence that we used that one, but I think the reason is because we were thinking about, shall we talk about best practice? So we talk about, you know, the secrets to build thriving ecosystem. We felt that this one isn't really correct because each ecosystem is different. But what we can do is we can provide you with tips and tricks on what worked from our experiences. And what we learned as well is that ecosystem building is actually a process. It's not a one-time thing that you do, but it's really a process that takes time. It's about coming together as a community and to have a clear vision. And I think this is really about the focus of today's session, and helping you understand and how you can contribute as an organization, as people working for those organizations, to a thriving Tunisian ecosystem that is well known in the region and hopefully globally as well. So before we start, and I'd like you to actually answer 2 questions for us, and please put them into the chat. So the 2 questions I'm asking you to think about is, you as a startup support organization, what are the type of entrepreneurs that you're best at helping? And then also think as a second one, what are the type of entrepreneurs that you are not so good at helping? And please put that into the chat. Just put best and then whatever you're good at, and worst, whatever you are not so good at. And there's really nothing, there's no bad answer here. It's really just about understanding. And I think, just give you an example. So type of entrepreneurs could be that they are, I don't know, maybe they are health entrepreneurs. Maybe they are entrepreneurs that are they have a social driven, right? But it can also be the type of businesses. Maybe you are super good in helping, you know, highly scalable businesses, and other ones are maybe better in working with traditional businesses. So again, there is no bad answer. But think about that, and please put it into the chat, and we'll be looking at those a bit later in our session. So let's start. And as I said, let's start about understanding what a thriving ecosystem is, and what all that has to do is what we call density of trust and clarity of purpose. So for all of you that actually joined the first webinar with Startup Common, you might remember that what they said is that network connectivity among ecosystem actors is among the single most important contributor to a strong ecosystem. And the reason for that is actually very simple. Because only when we have connected ecosystem, it allows entrepreneurs to quickly find the resources and the knowledge they need at each growth stage. And what that means is that they are able to get that knowledge. We are able to help them grow faster, but also ultimately, of course, to increase their survival of the startups. So when we talk about ecosystem, we mainly talk about an ecosystem, they thrive, and the people and the resources within are connected, and they work together to serve the entrepreneurs throughout all the stages of growth and development. And I think this is an important, because for a long time, we have assumed, and we have wrongly assumed, that we need more and more startup support organization to advance an ecosystem. And in other words, it actually meant that the majority of an ecosystem is very much linked to the amount of actors actually being present on the ground. And in 2018, so that already a few years ago, actually Startup Genome, they published a report that was looking at performance of ecosystem globally, and what are actually important drivers. And what they said is that ecosystem builders, what they should most care about is actually local connectivity and building a sense of community. So in other words, that what correlates with a strong overall ecosystem ranking, it's how well you are connected and how well you are actually joining together to serve a common purpose. And I think this is actually brilliant news because it also allows that entrepreneurial ecosystem basically can flourish around the world. So they are no longer tied to, I don't know, Silicon Valley, Stockholm, Berlin, but they are actually, they can flourish in many places all around the world. So I think as a key message here is that we say collaboration, it really matters, right? But if we then go into the reality, and I've been exposed to several ecosystems, several continents, and what we very often see is that we want to have this ecosystem, right? But then the reality is much more of an ecosystem. So the big question we want to ask ourselves is how do we move from this what we call obsolete ecosystem thinking that is really focusing around the well-being of a single organization to an ecosystem which everyone is connected and that really emphasizes the well-being of the whole network. Or in other words, it's about the whole ecosystem, such as in Tunisia. And going forward, I think we have to understand a little bit the basics, right, on entrepreneurial ecosystem. There are tons of theories, there are tons of concepts, but at its very, very core, entrepreneurial ecosystems, they're really about the people and the culture. And I really encourage you, if you're not familiar with the Kaufman Foundation from the US, they have actually developed a super interesting, very easy to read playbook around ecosystem building. And they came up with this super easy formula. They say people and culture equals everything. And I think this is astonishing because very often when we think about ecosystem, we think about organizations. But what we should think about is actually the people, because organizations, they're always defined by the very people that are work or that do work within these organizations. And I consider myself to be a passionate ecosystem builder. And when people ask me about, yeah, what is an ecosystem builder? What do you actually do? I tend to say that what I mainly do is about I connect people and I try to bring them together, right? And it's not just the organization, but it's really the people working within this organization that try to bring together. So in other words, I think when we talk about ecosystem, there is also a human side to it. Beside all the concepts that we know, there's actually a human side to it. And the reason is because we all want to be part of a system and the network that has a heart and a soul, right? We want to be proud. We want to be part of that system. And I think this is something that ultimately makes us be part of something greater. And the idea is, how can we actually make Tunisia, the ecosystem within Tunisia, such an ecosystem that you are proud of working there, that people are actually being attracted of coming to Tunisia because they know what the Tunisia ecosystem stands for and how it differentiates, for example, from ecosystems in the region, Morocco, Egypt, or likewise. And the two key components we found when we talk about this cultural, it's actually around trust and purpose. And whenever I talk about trust and purpose, I love that picture. And I love it because for me personally, I know nothing to do with ecosystem and maybe not what you expected, but it perfectly exemplifies the symbiotic of the two concepts. So whenever you look at that, who would voluntarily put his hand in the mouth of a crocodile? I reckon nobody would do that, right? And there's no reason to do it. Because there is no trust. We can't trust a crocodile that he won't close his mouth and actually bite off our hands. And as I said, there's no reason to do. Why should we? Maybe the only reason could be because we want to show how brave we are, but that also can turn into the worst idea we probably ever had in our life within seconds. So on the other side, if we say, yes, if there is trust, and when this trust is paired with a sense of a purpose, and this is clearly the case here with the crocodile and the bird, you know, we are willing to help and we are willing to support each other. And we are also willing to give before worrying about what we actually receive. So before we now go a bit more into the detail and see how that trust and purpose actually relates to the ecosystem, I want to do an exercise with you again, and that is actually more of an individual exercise. So please just grab a pen, grab a paper, and think about those three questions. who do you trust outside of your startup support organization? And if you know who you trust, why do you actually put those people on the list? So what makes it different that you trust those guys versus other ones that you didn't put on that list? And then if we kind of like reverse the whole question, also think about who trusts you that is not within your organization. And then why do you believe that actually these people trust you, right? This is maybe an exercise. I'll pause here for maybe a minute or two. Think about that, and then we move on, you know, putting trust and purpose in context of an overall thriving ecosystem. I'm using this time maybe to ask Sumaya,
Yes, sir.
Is anything coming in the chats around the first exercise?
Yep. So on the two other platforms, we received answers about you know, good at supporting. We received a few people saying experienced entrepreneurs, early stage ones, according to the industry, seed stage. For not good at supporting, we received first-time founders, early stage, and stubborn founders.
Stubborn founders, that's an interesting one. Love that. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Working, and we'll come back to that a bit later on again.
All right, we received also on the other platform some answers about the current questions. So for the first one, who do you trust outside of your SSO? We received partners. We received also not always the government. I'm being transparent here. I'm not gonna hide anything. Why do you trust the people you listed? He said previous experiences. We still didn't receive others, so I'll keep you posted if we have more. Okay. Excellent.
Cool. Thank you. I think again, this is really also an exercise, you know, to do it individually. I mean, if you want to share, super happy to hear. But I think it's also about the reflection of why. And the reason why we're doing it is also because it also became clear that usually the people you trust, there is somehow a relationship between, right? So you trust them because you know how they behave. You know them. For a longer time, maybe you have common purpose, you have a common goal, you want to achieve the same thing. So that is usually why you start trusting other people's. So I think that's just as that exercise. But let's continue then and really think about, okay, what has trust to do from an ecosystem perspective? And when we do talk about ecosystem perspective, I love to quote a sentence from Victor Wong, who is actually a former VC from Silicon Valley. And he's also the author of the book, The Rainforest, The Secrets to Building the Next Silicon Valley, which is a super interesting book, and I highly recommend it as well. If you have some time to read, there's some super interesting understanding on how ecosystems are built. And what he said is that when trust exists, then, and we help someone, we might not expect that we repay the favor directly, but we do expect that somehow someone will actually repay the favor in another way. And it's basically making almost, and I come back to what we call this difference between an ecosystem and the ecosystem. So if we have a strong network, we actually expect that anyone from that network is able to repay that favor. So it's not just a one-one transaction anymore, but it's about making a transaction with the system as a whole. And we do have faith that whenever I give something to that ecosystem, ultimately, I will also receive something back. And if we put that really into practice, I think it's about this, what we also call give first mindset or give first mentality. So what we're looking at is we want to play non-zero sum games, or we want to call positive sum games. Sometimes we also call them win-win situations. So what we are looking for is actually long-term win. So be deal makers, but not for the short term, but really for the long term. And it's also about that concept of actually, you know, I want to give something, and I know what I bring to the ecosystem and what I can get out of the ecosystem. That may sound still a bit abstract, and I'm happy to give an example on that as well. So for example, we know that entrepreneurs or startups at an early stage, very often they lack capital, right? So they do have capital, but they might not be able to provide or pay for the same fees as established businesses. But then you do have a lot of business support service providers. Could be legal companies, it can be whatever, marketing, strategy, agencies, whatever. And what we found is that sometimes, for example, if those service providers have specific offers to startups, and it could be that they invested time and the energy for free in the very beginning or for a reduced cost at the beginning, right? But the idea behind is that you start developing a relationship. And once those startups actually grow and once those startups become bigger and bigger, you already have kind of like established a relationship that will be rewarded in the long term, because they will very likely stay with you as a customer and start paying you normal fees for the long run. And of course, it's a bit risky because we don't know whether startups survive or not. But even if they don't survive, if they had very good experiences, they will most likely recommend it to someone else from the startup ecosystem. So even then, and that's what I meant with if you make a transaction with the system as a whole, if they're spreading the word, if they're talking positively about you, it might actually mean that it will be repaid by someone else who actually becomes your client, because it has been a recommendation from the one that you actually provided help with at the moment they weren't really, they couldn't afford it that way. So that's just as one example. And the other one, which is really about this fail is no shame. So I think important is, and if we trust, then it's about we as a community, we welcome entrepreneurs back, even if they have failed. And we can welcome them back, for example, as new co-founders. We can welcome them back as early employees of new startups, because they have experiences. They went through that journey, and they bring value to companies. But it can also be that they start working as advisors, or maybe they can be employees of your companies, like startup support organization. They didn't manage, they didn't made a new big startup, but they have really valuable experience, and it's super good if you can recycle this experience and actually give it forward. And just as a side note here, because in preparation as well of that webinar, I was actually looking at the Startup Act, which I think is really a super interesting process that you have been doing, and congratulations on that. I think this is really progressive thinking. I've never seen that in other ecosystems as such.
Thank you, Benny.
And what I read, if I read it well, it's that actually there is almost a right in Tunisia now to have a 1-year leave period to actually start, with a new idea, to actually put your idea into practice and do your startup. And even if it's failed, you are actually still allowed to go back to your former employee and continue working. And I think this is really what I'm saying. It's an experience. And even if there is failure, there's no shame in it, because people made so much experience, and for sure it will pay off, because they will bring back much more knowledge and really help you thrive in the old jobs again. So I think this is really first time I'm hearing that. And for me, that's really wow. So congratulations, seriously, on this Startup Act.
Thank you, Ben. No, you understood it the right way. This is it. Yep.
Yeah, I had to read it 2 times to understand, but really, I think it's fabulous. And the second concept I was mentioning is actually around purpose. And I think here we all have a common purpose. If I ask you, why are we here? What do we want to achieve? I think everybody will say that, what we want to do is actually, we want to help entrepreneurs flourish. We want to make sure that entrepreneurs having a good environment in Tunisia that help them create their business and increase the survival rate. Maybe you want to attract even more and foreign entrepreneurs to come in, right? So that's the common vision that everybody kind of like, engages in. And what that actually means in practice is that we should have this what we call entrepreneur first mentality. So we are here to help entrepreneurs. I think that's it. That's why we have the startup support organization. And that also means that we need to remind ourselves that without entrepreneurs, there's actually no ecosystem, or at least no entrepreneurial ecosystem. And if there's no ecosystem, there is also no need for us as startup support organizations, right? So the focus should really be on the entrepreneurs. And I like to quote here, actually, Brett Feld, who did some amazing work as well, and published books around how to build startup entrepreneurial communities. And what he says is basically, we have two types of actors. We have the leaders and we have the feeders. And the leaders should be the entrepreneurs and the feeders should be everyone else. And it's super important that we do not mix up the two things. So leaders should remain leaders and feeders should remain feeders. And if we start mixing up those roles, it's not so good. And as long as we actually stick to these roles, I think we can say we are in a very good journey over the long run. So I guess this is really a mindset that I want us to kind of like remind us constantly, whatever we're doing, we're here to help the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, Benny, I have a question for you live here saying, what do you mean by feeders?
Okay, feeders are basically everyone that provides support to startups, right? So a feeder can be a startup support organization, can be an accelerator, can be an incubator, but it can also be a mentor. It can also be the government in that sense of providing the right policies, or maybe basically it's everyone in the ecosystem that has this vision to support entrepreneurs and provide knowledge or resources to them. Does that make it clearer?
Great, thank you.
And then the second one, and I think it's what we should think of as entrepreneurial communities, I think we should think of it to be radically inclusive. And by that I mean that everybody who really wants to join an ecosystem should be able to join an ecosystem. And I think there's an interesting question here. So who is really an entrepreneur, right? And what we found, it actually turns out that there are 4 distinct types of entrepreneurs. So we have small businesses, but we also have these massively scalable startups, of course. And we have traditional businesses and we have social entrepreneurs. And all of them are engaged in entrepreneurship. But very often people still think that one group is not an entrepreneur, right? It's just us. We are entrepreneurs. We are the ICT guys and we are the real entrepreneurs. And the ones that work on small business, they are not entrepreneurs. And I think everyone is an entrepreneur, but they are in for a different game. They're different. Maybe not everybody wants to create the next billion-dollar company. Not everybody wants to have triple growth over the next 2 months. But all of them have a reason to be there. And all of them are entrepreneurs. And I think it's important that we distinguish them, because then it also means that we as a startup support organization actually have to be very clear on who do we support, right? And even if people say like, you know, maybe that traditional guy, I don't know what I can learn from because I have this super cool business, but maybe this guy has been exporting products to other regions for 20 years. And if you're a startup and you want to export or expand in other markets, maybe this guy can have super interesting contacts to give you because he has been present there for a long time. So it's also about, you know, how can I benefit from the people that are actually within an ecosystem? So that's the other part. And to just also give you a real life example, when all this stuff comes together, and this is actually from Alberta in Canada. And what they did is basically they came together as a community and they said like, hey, let's do a social contract. And by social contract, they defined a couple of guidelines of what they want to do. So they want to have diversity. So they want to embrace diversity. As I said, be inclusive. It's about offering help. It's about trusting people. And I think what I particularly like here, it's also this paid forward. And these are easy things that you can do, right? So what they said, for example, if we want to be part of that community, so for every introduction I get, I will provide an introduction to another person. Or for every hour of advice that I receive, I will actually provide an hour of advice to someone else. These are easy things that we can do, but it really helps to build an ecosystem of trust and of bringing that knowledge, spreading that knowledge, making it more accessible to everybody else. And I think there's one last part here, which I kind of like. It's if we have this strong community, it also means that when people do not adhere to those rules, they will get punished. And I'm not talking about paying a fee because it's a social contract, but what it means is that this word again will spread. If someone is really about putting forward his ego, it's only about getting stuff out and not giving back anything, that word will spread as well. And then simply people will not trust this guy anymore and they will no longer work with them. So I think that's also, it's very strong in the positive thing, but it's also strong if people don't comply with it. So that's just as kind of like an example. And then I think the last, sorry, that was too quick. The last bit that I wanted to share here, it's about what do we mean by entrepreneur-centric? And when I was working in East Africa, I actually came across, what's it called? A proverb, which says it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that has become a very much of a proverb as well when we talk about entrepreneurs, because it takes an ecosystem to rise an entrepreneur. And what that means is that it's not about a single organization. It's not about single individuals who can feed, nurture, or raise entrepreneurs. It's really a collective effort. It's about different players coming together, different players having very clear kind of like value proposition of how you want to help someone, and it's the interplay that makes it up ultimately. How do we as a community are able to support these entrepreneurs? So the result out of that is that if you think back as your role as startup support organization, it's not that you have to offer everything. It's not that you have to offer services for all different type of entrepreneurs I was mentioning. You don't have to offer services for the very early stage ideation all the way to kind of like, you know, scaling and expansion. It helps if you have a very, very clear idea of like, who is my target group? How can I help? But at the same time, understanding that if you're more advanced, if you're supporting, for example, post-revenue entrepreneurs, you need to kind of like feed those entrepreneurs from somewhere. So who are my partners that actually are helping me to feed my own pipeline? And afterwards, maybe they need some Series A investment, maybe they need Series B investment. So who are the partners that I can refer my entrepreneurs to once they actually come through the project? So that's really the whole thinking. And it's a little bit of an ugly chart, I have to admit, but I hope it makes that point. There are a lot of different entrepreneurship journeys, and every single startup or entrepreneur is actually taking a different route. But what they have in common is that they will take at some point different support services available. So what we need to do is about understand, okay, what is our clear value proposition? Who are the partners that we can work with that actually tells me what comes before my service, and what are the ones that I want to refer to, what comes after my service. So it's about understanding where am I within that journey. And maybe you have different programs, right? The same organization can have different programs. Then the whole thing has to be done on that program level. And what we found, really what also differentiates more emerging ecosystem from a more mature ecosystem, is that those startup support organizations, they start focusing and specializing much more. And this can be specializing for specific verticals, for example, because it's totally different if you have a health tech business, lots to do, for example, with legal things, than if you are more into the agribusiness. So I guess it's about, you can specialize around verticals, but you can also specialize around specific technologies. For example, in Switzerland, we became quite famous, or we have what we called the Zug Valley, which is super specialized around blockchain technology. And it really attracted lots of international blockchain companies coming into Switzerland. And we have co-working spaces that are purely focusing around providing space for blockchain companies. So again, it could be focused around the technology. I know Paris, for example, is making a big effort around artificial intelligence. Again, this is not sector, it's not a vertical, but it's a technology. So there are different ways of specializing. I think the important message here is that we do know who do we target. We do know what is the value prop, what is the added benefit, why actually entrepreneurs should join my program. And I think if I can go back, and maybe Sumaya, you already mentioned a few of them, right, in the very beginning, and that's also why we did that very first exercise. It's about where am I good at and where am I not so good at? And it's perfectly fine to be not so good at everything. It's actually what we strive for. So we want to be good at something, and we want to actually be super professional at something. So there's a reason people are coming. And I think it's also an interesting exercise because it actually shows you very clearly that we have different strengths, we have different weaknesses. So as startup support organizations, we are not always in competition, right? Actually, there is also some benefits of working together. So if if an entrepreneur is coming to me and I think like, hey, maybe this is not really the strength of our program, I can refer it to someone else. But I do expect that at the same time that these other, if the same thing happens for another support organization, they're referring it back to me. So I think this is an important exercise, and I think we've seen it. And unfortunately, I can't really see the chat, which would be nice to actually see what you do.
So we have actually a question, if you want me, it's aligned with what you just shared. So there is Hamza saying, do you advise an SSO to specialize or not in an emerging ecosystem like Tunisia?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's something that is maybe not possible just like from day one, but it's definitely the vision that you should have. It's really about understanding, you know, where do we as a company, where is our focus? Where do we have also like you have people with different backgrounds. So what is the strength of the employees that you have, or what are the employees that you need to really specialize around those projects, around an area? Let's call it an area, because it can be, as I said, a vertical, it can be a technology. It can also be a type you can focus around social businesses, for example. Impact Hub in Switzerland, they have different impact hubs. One is entirely focused around socially driven entrepreneurs. So yes.
Amazing. Another question we received a few minutes ago, I guess, when you were, you know, discussing the competition, etc. So Salma is saying, how to behave when other accelerators and incubators are competitive instead of being collaborative?
That's a good and a very difficult one, I have to say. I actually don't want to talk too much about it, because I think that's also a topic that Charlotte is actually going to talk about, right? And we will see how in practice that actually worked, or what we did to overcome that that challenge, which I fully agree. It's not easy, it's hard, but it's manageable.
Absolutely.
All right.
Is there any other question? Otherwise, I think
Nope.
I would close my chapter. And I think the last one is really, and this is more of a call to action. I think, as we said, entrepreneurship promotion or helping entrepreneurs to flourish, it's really what we call a multiplayer game. It's a collective action. It's a collective action of SSOs to really cover the whole entrepreneurial journey. And they don't have to cover that as a single organization, but as a network, as a community. So I think that's really the key message that I wanted to say. It's about how can we make sure that we also hand over, that we don't own entrepreneurs, we don't hinder them actually in their growth by owning them, but really thinking more about how do we act as I mean, this is word of calling a servant leader, right? So how do we actually support the entrepreneurs so they become better? And we can take pride of that in having supported entrepreneurs that were super successful. It's not about owning them. It's about having the pride of actually, hey, we played a role in that. But they went through that journey. So I think
amazing. I love it, Benny. We received two questions. The first one is about SSO, so I'm gonna clarify quickly. SSO is a startup support organization, and we have another question, Benny, for you, but it's not 100% you know, aligned with the content you shared. But you know, Hamza is asking, what advice do you have for an SSO that want to go regional?
So I didn't understand the last one. That wants to go?
Yeah. Regional, I guess, like regional. Become in the region, not only in Tunisia, go regional.
Oh, regional. Regional. Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. I think what I learned is that if you want to go regional, if you want to go into a new market, let's call it that way, if it's regional or if it's actually a bit broader, I think you always have to do due diligence in that sense. So you need to understand where are the white spots, right? Is this spot covered in the market already or not? As I said, it's not that much about having just a lot of actors, but really about understanding, you know, where is the gap and how can I as an organization support that gap? I think that is clear. And unfortunately, this is something that we don't always see. And I think that's also a little bit, sometimes what we see there, particularly when it's donor funded programs, sometimes you have a donor telling kind of like, hey, you should do that, right? And sometimes donors, they have their own KPIs, and their own KPIs are not always 100% aligned with actually where the market need is. And in that sense, I know it's a hard one. I'm exactly in the same situation, and we are trying sometimes what we called softly educate donors. So trying to get into a conversation with them and saying like, you know, we actually found that this is a really big need. So really if you're a business, you don't go in if there is no need, right? And this is exactly the same if you're an SSO. Look for the needs and then do it in the best way you can.
Amazing. Actually, it's a very interesting point that you just brought out, Benny. So it's negotiating really, and maybe bringing some data to back, you know, the needs, so that you can convince, you know, the donor or any partner that is supporting you as an SSO. Yeah.
And maybe to add on to Benny's answer, I would suggest to explore the partners that are in that market first, like try to connect with them and understand from them what the market looks like and what might be needed. So that as a first step, just to understand and then make a decision whether to go there or not.
Great.
Cool, then I would love to hand over to Charlotte, who has tons of really practical experience. And yeah. Please, Charlotte, stage is yours.
Thank you, Benny. I think that was very helpful to see all to explore all these concepts that we're now going to see in details, and I'm going to try to give you some specific examples that we've done within the Swiss Entrepreneurship Program, and in particular in Peru, but also we'll look at some other examples in Vietnam as well. So I'll give you first a bit of further background on the program. And then we'll look into the vision for an ecosystem and the vision for a startup support organization. And again, like this is specific examples of activities that we have done that you might be able to replicate or adapt or just get inspiration from. We'll also look at example of bottom-up collaboration initiatives. And we'll finish with some lesson learned that again, hopefully you can get inspired from. So to start with our program, so the Swiss Entrepreneurship Program is a global program. We're funded by the Swiss Development Cooperation, and we're in 7 countries, very diverse countries. We're in Peru, we're in 5 countries in the Balkans, and we're in Vietnam. And what we do is that we support the development of entrepreneurial ecosystem organization like you guys, by providing strategic support to these organizations. And we also facilitate exchange and collaboration among those organizations and the overall ecosystem. Why do we do this? Well, we look so that entrepreneurs can benefit from improved program and support structures, so they're better equipped to grow and sustain their business, and therefore they're creating jobs. And this is the end objective of our program. If we can go back one slide, please. How we do it, basically we identify the needs of our partners. So these are incubators, accelerators, business central networks, venture capital funds, and we try to understand what they want to improve, whether it's their acceleration program, their mentor network, their investment readiness of their startups, if they want to train angels better. And we match them with international experts with relevant experience through our Entrepreneur in Residence program. This program is made out of experienced founders, accelerator managers, investors who are in transition, and they have an experience in developed ecosystems. And they're ready to go to our countries and spend between 1 and 2 months to work part-time in the day-to-day of our partners on a voluntary basis. In other words, it's really like peer-to-peer work. It's, you know, working at eye level with your counterpart in another country, basically. And why they do it? Well, they want to give back because they have received support in their early days, whether they were startup founders or accelerator managers, and they're willing to share their experience and get to know a new ecosystem and a new market. Our teams on the ground also provide value and facilitate connections to foster collaboration among these ecosystem organizations. So the reason why I wanted to share this about our program is to give you a little bit of context of what I will share now. And basically, as the Swiss Entrepreneurship Program, we're really a neutral convener with no interest or agenda other than support our partners and help the ecosystem where we're working to develop. Our vision is that the entrepreneurs, and I'm referring to Benny's point here as well, and the organization are driving the development of the ecosystem, not us as a program. And we're rather there to support and help them think bigger than themselves and just, improve what they do. And actually, you as ecosystem organization, it's important to keep in mind that you're part of a bigger ecosystem, and whatever you do has an impact on the rest of the ecosystem. And so trying to act within that awareness and thinking that, you're part of something bigger is important to develop that thriving ecosystem. So next, what we did in Peru a couple years back, we gathered all our partners in one room for one full day. And the idea was to have them meet one another, learn from each other, and develop a common understanding of the ecosystem that they want to develop collectively. So we started with an exercise called the painted picture exercise, where we had to, or they had to think rather, where the ecosystem would go in 3 years' time, was they had to be very specific in terms of what they wanted to achieve. So we looked at all these questions, who would be the actors involved, how many incubators there would be or accelerator programs, would the government be involved, would the corporation be involved, which current startups would have a success stories, which one would have an exit, what kind of diversity there would be in the founding teams, would there be more female founders, which regional investors would be investing in Peru. We looked also at what would be in the ecosystem, whether there would be bigger events than there currently are, more events, would there be more scale-up entrepreneurs, more advanced companies, more patents registered. We looked at the how as well, with some corporation would some corporation buy startups? Would there be more verticals in the startup acceleration programs? Would some of the angel investors take earlier investments, or would there be corporate venture capital available? We look at the where as well. Would the startups be founded also outside Lima? I mean, there are right now startups founded outside Lima, but would there be more of them? Would there be more support organization outside Lima? And basically we looked at all these specific questions, and we also defined the KPIs, the indicators, very specifically. So how many jobs would the startups create in 3 year time? How many business angels there would be? Would there be the first Peruvian unicorn? And how many startups would be raising capital, and how much every year? And we also looked at the Sustainable Development Goals and identify which one the ecosystem wanted to focus on. And you might wonder, why did we do this exercise? Well, actually, going back to Benny's point, having a vision and working towards a common end is key in ecosystem development. It's really something that I would say even it's a basis. And at the end of the exercise, as a group, the organizations develop a statement for the Peruvian ecosystem, which is on the next slide. And I'll let you read for 1 minute. And basically the idea of this was to have the ecosystem organization later on, when they developed and fine-tuned their own value proposition, that they would feel that they're doing it to contribute to the vision statement of the overall ecosystem. So again, they're part of something bigger, and they're working towards a common goal. So that was the first exercise. And then we did another exercise, a mapping exercise of the current ecosystem. And basically every organization put themselves under the category that was relevant, like where they felt that they contribute the most, whether it was incubator, accelerator, whether investors, media, government, university, you name it. And we not only mapped the organization in the room, but we also mapped the organization that were not in the room to be as inclusive as possible and to get a wider overview, to be as wide as possible to get an overview of the ecosystem. And we did it with Post-its, but then one of our partners decided to produce this infographic that we're seeing now. And what's interesting is first people could, picture themselves and see where their peers picture themselves. Because sometimes you see an organization in the ecosystem, you think you know what they do. And then if you see how they have mapped themselves out on the mapping, you realize, oh, I didn't know actually that, they were also doing investments. I thought they were just doing acceleration or so it really helps you as an organization to get a better overview of your peers. And what we did is that we shared it in the ecosystem newsletter. And if some organization weren't yet part of it, they contacted us to be added because they really wanted to, be on the picture, and that way it really helped us have a better picture of the ecosystem. So why did we do this exercise? Oh, you can keep. Why did we do this exercise? Well, it again, it makes you find out about other organization, and again, to Benny's point, network connectivity among ecosystem actors is really the single most contributor to a strong ecosystem. And once other organizations exist, and maybe you're in the same market, or maybe they will feed you with entrepreneurs, or maybe you will feed them with entrepreneurs or whatnot, then you can reach out to them and start connecting with them. I'll say also that. Yes,
I have a question for you, Charlotte. Should I jump on it?
Yes, please.
Amazing. So we have Sammy saying, when launching an accelerator, how to validate the need for it. And he's putting more details in case you don't have access to such mapping.
Well, I think
market research question. Yeah.
It's a very good question. And I would say if your customer is the entrepreneur, exactly what you do with your entrepreneurs, and you tell them, make sure that you ask your customer what they want. Well, exactly the same. As an accelerator, the same lessons and the same principles apply to you. Find out, from entrepreneurs, go out in the street, talk to entrepreneurs, go to entrepreneurial events and talk to entrepreneurs and find out what they need, and see if the service that you're building is what they actually need and whether they'll be interested in joining your organization.
Great, thank you, Charlotte.
Sure. So after spending some time on the ecosystem, we actually went down to the organization level. And we ask our partners to define their vision and their business plan for the next 3 years, keeping in mind and defining actually their staff and financial resources, their KPIs, how would they measure success, and also defining priorities for the next 30 days, 90 days, and 1 year. And the idea was that this business plan would contribute to the ecosystem vision and the statement that they had worked on before. And what was very interesting is that some of the ecosystem organization actually were open enough to share their vision and their plan with their peers. And that was really, really great, because it really showed that they felt that, during that day that they were in a trusted environment and they could share basically their business plan with their competitors, but not thinking necessarily that they're the competitors, but they're really, organization around them that can actually also help them. And I'll say that I recognize that this type of exercise and organization takes time and resources to do. And we, as an independent program, it's our objective. So it's easy almost, I would say, for us to do it. But the feedback was really amazing, and you could say, and what was really cool is that you could see afterwards that Afterwards, I mean like weeks after, month after, that the organization really started collaborating because they had met in that room, and they could really like relate to one another, and just pick up their phone and call the other organization to ask for help, or to ask for support, or bounce ideas, or whatnot. So if you as ecosystem organization right now, you don't feel as a group that you can really go through these exercises, just gathering, for example, every month in a meetup, and just sharing your news, sharing your upcoming events, sharing your upcoming cohort, asking people to share what they're up to, or actually like sharing your next call for application is really something that it's very simple, but it can be very powerful. And before our program existed in Peru, they were already doing that. So you don't need a program like ours to do it. The reason why they started was because they wanted to coordinate the events for the Entrepreneurship Week, the Global Entrepreneurship Week, and they wanted to make sure that their event were overlapping, and that they were giving as much value as possible to the rest of the ecosystem with their events. So that's when they started meeting. And after the Global Entrepreneurship Week, they decided to just continue because it was adding so much value. So again, if you don't feel like you're quite ready to do such an exercise, just meeting and just connecting with your peers is already very, very powerful. So now I would like to share with you 2 specific examples of bottom-up collaboration that our program has helped develop. And these collaborations did not happen because of us. We're just there to really support them when they appeared. One is related to investments in Peru, and the other one is related to mentoring in Vietnam. So the first one, so this is the picture of a meeting, a one-off meeting that could have gone pretty much nowhere. So on the picture, you see on the right-hand side, Adrian, who was from my team. And then you see Guillermo, Gonzalo, and Javier, who are all 3 of them are actually managers of Business Central networks. And they knew each other before we gathered them, but they had never actually sat down together, just because they were, focusing. They were very early stage back then. That was 2016. And they were just, focusing on building the Business Central network, and they didn't think like talking to their competition was something that, would add really value to them. So, and on our side from the program, when we started working with, or we wanted to start working with Business Central network, we gathered, the reason for that meeting is that we gathered them to understand how we could help them and how we could support them in basically getting more investments done. And so in that meeting, they started talking. They started talking, and they started sharing their challenges, how little pipeline there was, how some investors had unethical practices, some of the valuation were out of scale, that there was no data on investments in Peru, and basically they were like really like throwing all their challenges out there, and they got out of the meeting really saying how how valuable it was to like share all these challenges, and how they realized that they felt less alone when left the meeting. Like they realized, oh, actually other people are experiencing the same thing, and they even like started thinking that they could maybe do something together. So they asked us to reconvene them, and this one meeting became a monthly meeting. And they, they were sharing their challenges on a regular basis, sharing tips and so on. And fast forward to a year later, next. That's in May 2017. They launched a PECAP, so the Peruvian Association of Seed and Venture Capital. And actually a funny anecdote is that, as you might remember, I mentioned that these were like Business Central networks, and the association, when they were building it, was supposed to be the Peruvian Association of Business Central Networks. But the night before the launching event, the president changed the name, and it was a bit of a mess because we had everything ready, the program and the, everything printed, the press release, everything was ready. But still, we changed the name last minute to the Peruvian Association of Seed and Venture Capital, because he realized, the president, that the next actor who was going to come into the ecosystem in terms of investment were going to be venture capital, and he wanted to make sure that they would feel welcome in the association and they would join the association rather than building their own association. So last minute, the whole name of the association was changed, and it was a mess on the moment, but it was really, really for the better, because nowadays, Pickup is an association like fully independent. It has its own budget, its own team. It has more than 25 paying members, and these members are business angel networks, they're venture capital funds, they're family offices, they're accelerators, service providers as well, so law firms, accounting firms. And the association publishes data on the Peruvian ecosystem that is very well recognized and really helps Peru to be on the map, on the international map, because they publish, how much investment Peruvian startups got in 2019, for example. And then this information gets related at a regional level and international level, and it really, really helps Peru to be put on the international map. So one of the big things that sorry?
Yep, Charlotte,
yes.
I have a question for you right away here. Is Pickup open to Tunisia to be part of it?
Of course. I mean, so they're members of Pickup who are investment firms or venture capital, for example, from other countries, because they're interested in investing in Peru. And so they join Pickup so that they have access to information and pipeline and so on. So definitely Pickup is open to actors outside Peru, for sure. And so what Pickup does is actually to publish data, let's say publicly, but also like has more detailed data for its members. It also coordinates with regional ecosystems. Or actually, it connects regionally with other ecosystems. So in Peru, like they connect with Colombia, with Chile, with Argentina. And actually they're even connected now with EBAN, so the network of business angels in Europe. So they really try to connect internationally. And they also do some policy work to improve regulations for investors. And they also like right now pushing forward for a fund of fund, which I understand there's also something around those lines in Tunisia.
Exactly. We have another question, Charlotte, yes, for you from Salma again. She's asking, how do you find Tunisian initiatives? It's not a clear question. How do you find Tunisian initiatives? How do you expose Tunisian initiatives worldwide?
That's a very good question. I would say that I would try to find opportunities of media visibility. So sharing stories from Tunisia, first on your own networks and media outlets in Tunisia, but progressively like trying to connect with like big international outlets interested in entrepreneurship is a way of trying to get visibility. Also participating in events, international events, is a way of getting some visibility for initiatives in Tunisia. So there's definitely a lot of, and I'm happy to connect with whoever asked the question afterwards to brainstorm on what are the ways. But I'll give an example, a specific example we had in Peru is that there's a big annual conference called the Peru Venture Capital Conference. And we really try to invite some of the writers from big from publications on entrepreneurship from the States. And we managed to get an article on the Peruvian ecosystem and how up and coming it is. So there's definitely various ways of getting visibility. It requires a little bit of work, but it's not that complicated.
If I can just add maybe one single sentence here as well, I think about this purpose, right? And Charlotte was mentioning about what is the purpose of the Peruvian ecosystem. So what's the vision? And they kind of like related it to the SDGs goals. So I think ultimately it's also about, once you have that, also what is your narrative? If you have a narrative for an ecosystem, you're kind of like distinguishing your ecosystem towards the other ecosystem, because we know that ecosystems are in competition with one another, right? And then if you have consistently stories around similar topics, then actually that brings new light on it. So if you have one entrepreneur coming up from there, and then you have one from there, one you have from there, it's maybe different. But if you're bringing up entrepreneurs, for example, let's say you had one mentioning around education, right, Charlotte, in Peru. So if you have several coming up in education, I know there for a fact there are a few in Peru now, people are starting to become much more concentrated on that as well. So having an alternative really helps as well in promoting an ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Beyond the country.
Great. Yep.
So, I mean, just the bottom line of this story on PICAP is that, you know, as an ecosystem organization, if you feel the need for a formal collaboration, like the creation of an association, and it doesn't have to be around investment, it can be around something else, don't hesitate to convene your peers and you know, just do it. Like, just try, and you'll see, you know, just talk with other people, see if there is a common interest, and don't hesitate to just go ahead and do it. And you might feel that it takes some time, and it does actually, but you know, working for the greater good will eventually give you benefit as well. And again, that was a point that Benny made earlier. Like you will, you know, what you put in, you'll get something out at some point. And if you believe that, you know, formalizing a collaboration within an association will help, just go ahead and do it. I can tell you that Gonzalo, Guillermo, and Javier really benefited and still benefit from PICAP today. So I can really encourage you to do so. And now I'll go to another story, which is a bit different, and it's another country. This is something that happened in Vietnam. So one of the topics as a program that we worked on at the beginning was how to create a mentoring culture in emerging ecosystems. And in Vietnam in 2016, people in the ecosystem define a mentor as a professional who gives a workshop on a specific topic, answers some questions in an event, and then they disappear. So then this picture was taken in Vietnam when our program gathered a group of ecosystem organization and introduced the concept of long-term mentorship. So with you know, pro bono mentors who have experience in entrepreneurship and are willing to dedicate a couple hours per month to helping entrepreneurs. And at the end of the event, the ecosystem organization realized that there weren't so many mentors in Vietnam, and what would be very helpful would be actually that each organization could access the mentors of other organizations. And basically they decided to do something about it. So they created the Vietnam Mentor Initiative. And basically it's a platform that accesses that exactly what they were looking to do. So it allows ecosystem organizations to access directly other ecosystem organizations' mentors. And also VMI trains mentors. And apparently some mentors reported that they joined X Accelerator because they were part of VMI and they knew it was a sort of label, and they also knew that they would get training and they would get value. So that's how, you know, and VMI actually also recognizes Mentor of the Year. They give a Mentor of the Year award. So, so basically, again, like this is an example of an ESO that, or actually a group of entrepreneurship organization that identified a pain point and decided to do something about it. In this case, our program support developed the solution, but you know, we just like we sped up the process. If we hadn't been there, it would have still happened. So it's something that really can be can happen in other ecosystems. And the idea is, you know, not to do this if it doesn't make sense to you, but just get inspiration of such initiative of collaboration, really add value to the rest of the ecosystem. So let's get into now some of the lessons that we can learn from all this. Yes, yeah, maybe there's a question already.
Yep. In the meantime, another question on our side. So the question is, it's a founder of a startup. He's saying how to vet if joining an accelerator is good for me.
That's a very good question. I would say, like, try to find out from alumni of that accelerator first. Oh, actually, no. First, I would even ask, you always find information on the website of the accelerator about what they offer, but try to meet with the team and try to really understand what's the value that you can get out of it. And also talk as much as possible with former or entrepreneurs who went through this program to see, what they valued and does that make sense to you at this point of time? Because accelerators can be great. There are a bunch of them. They have very different value propositions. And I think if you don't want to, or I was going to say, if you don't want to waste your time, but if you want to gain as much as possible, you really have to do your due diligence and make sure that the program and the services that they offer will be relevant for you at this point in time.
Great, thank you, Charlotte.
Mm-hmm. So some lessons. You're not alone. I hope you get this point from our presentations. You're part of a community. It's your job to make this ecosystem a relevant ecosystem and not an ecosystem, as Benny was mentioning earlier. Next. It's all about, giving first, giving back, you name it, sharing, convening, thinking that the greater good goes first before your own interest, and that eventually it pays off. And, Benny and I don't want to pretend that, this is the Care Bear world and everything is happy and love and perfect and, it's not, but definitely thinking about the bigger group is important. And of course, it's super important as well to think about your own organization. Next, what you want to achieve, what's your vision, how are you going to sustain your business in the framework of your ecosystem? And actually, I want to raise here a point about sustainability because it's a strong challenge that ecosystem organizations face. And it can be very tempting to change your focus as an organization just because there's a new fund, there's a new grant that you can go for, but that would make you shift focus. And I would say, really try to define your vision first. Don't pivot just because there's money. Be the best at what you do. And if you're the best at what you do, you'll get funded for that. You'll find funding. Also, something to keep in mind in terms of sustainability is that not everything for entrepreneurs have to be free. Of course, early stage entrepreneurs don't have much money, and it's hard to charge them a high amount for an acceleration program, for example. But you can still charge a little bit just to make sure that they're really interested in your program. And then keep in mind that startups who are at the stage of raising capital are often ready to spend a fair amount of money to get to their objective. And you will define what it looks like, if it's a success fee or whatnot. But do keep that in mind that not everything has to come for free for entrepreneurs. And even events, we've come across some organizations who charge for events. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but sometimes just charging a little bit so that it covers your cost will really help you on the long run. So don't hesitate to test and try. And I've mentioned it earlier. Next, basically the tips that you give to your entrepreneurs, all the principles of being focused or talking to your customers, they apply to you, and your customer are the entrepreneurs. They're your main customers, not the government, not the development corporation. The entrepreneurs are your customers, and you should design your services for your customers. Think big, start small, fail fast, be agile. All these lessons also apply to you as an organization. And finally, and this is something that Benny has already mentioned, is that the sum is greater than the individual parts. I give a few examples with PICAP, the Association of Seed and Venture Capital in Peru, or with the Vietnam Mentor Initiative, or just meeting monthly. There are hundreds of ways of adding value to others and to collaborate. So actually, not waiting more than that. If you can now do a last exercise and next. And think of, what is the one thing that you can do today to build trust or collaborate with your peers in the ecosystem? And take a few minutes to think about what you can do today, what you can do in 1 month's time and next year, and really put it on paper, and we'll ask you maybe to share in a second.
Amazing. So Charlotte, I have in the meantime another question.
Sure.
So what ecosystem would you advise as a benchmark to grow fast?
That's a very good question. And my answer would be none. Every single ecosystem is different. Of course, you can look up to other ecosystems and you can learn from them. But there is no size that fits all. So ecosystem development is really, really bottom up. So, try to get as much information and follow, reports or articles or networks or social media feeds from other organizations in other ecosystems. Try to learn as much as possible and read as well as much as possible. Benny mentioned some of the books that are really, really relevant in ecosystem development. But really, the development of an ecosystem is bottom up. And if you collaborate, if you really try to develop as a group, is the best recipe to build your own ecosystem and in a sustainable way. Copy pasting is not something that works in ecosystem development.
I love the answer. I'm happy this question was asked. So there is Norman saying, this is the good exercise we'll do with my team. I guess he's talking about maybe those 3 questions. There is another question, actually. What's the most sustainable business model of an SSO you saw in your experience?
It's a very good question. I don't know if there's the best business model. I would say that in my experience, business models that are a mix of, charging for services, but also getting some funding from a grant from the government or from an international organization. So I would say a hybrid model. So not only depending on grants, but not only investing or charging is probably the most, if I can say, sustainable model. It's not easy, and there's no, there's no happy recipe. But I would say that it gives you the pros of getting a grant and having some sort of visibility of for how long you have the money. But at the same time, you cannot depend only on grants because, governments change their strategies, organizations change their focus, and then you find yourself with nothing. And so if you've been charging in the meantime for some of your services, then, you can always bounce back on that kind of revenues.
Amazing. So the same person is actually following up and saying, Benny, Charlotte, would you advise in an ecosystem like Tunisia to think to have equity accelerators, equity-based accelerators, I guess he means?
It's a very good question. Benny, you want to go? Or?
I mean, whether they should take equity as accelerators. I think there's a big discussion around that. And I was actually 2 years ago in the US, and I was struck by a number where they said that, from all the accelerators in the US, I think about 5% are really self-sustaining, or 5%. And I was struck by the number because if I think of a country that probably would be self-sustaining, then it probably would be the US, right? I think there's been a huge shift just generally of not just focusing only on equity, because equity it's difficult. It's a high risk game, right? So you invest in several companies, one needs to pay off. And what really often happens is that this payoff also takes time.
Exactly.
So you invest today and you get it back tomorrow, but it can take 3, 4, 5, even whatever year, 10 years, right? And you have to make sure that you remain liquid during all that time, because you can't just wait. So I think it's, I mean, equity is definitely something to consider. I think it's an interesting way, but it should not be the only one. I think that was my learning, coming back to what Charlotte said before, diversifying equity, diversifying income streams is probably the best way to go. There's also a big opportunity, for example, to work with large corporates. Not from kind of like the philanthropic side of the large corporates, but really also from the business sides. There are a lot of large companies interested in actually looking for new innovation that actually benefits the company, right? So there is both are valid. So you can have like more the philanthropic side, coming from the foundations of the big companies, and also really try to work and sometimes develop certain programs together with the business sides of the corporates, and then charging for a couple of services, as Charlotte mentioned. I think that is probably the most sustainable way to move forward. But don't disregard equity. It's an option, but probably not the magic solution on its own.
I'll probably
Amazing.
share that
I
think there is a trend moving a little bit away from equity and doing more equity-free checks at the end of an acceleration program, or investment at the end of the acceleration program rather than at the beginning.
Amazing. So to be able to be respectful of your time, guys, and the time of the audience, I will be take only one more question, and I read it. I'm gonna like resume it my way for it to be clear for you guys. So I think it's about team building, and the person is asking how to train my team in order to help me lead the accelerator. And to put more context to this question, being part of the ecosystem myself, we don't have, today's schools or specific trainings for program managers or people that are really hands-on to an accelerator or incubator helping the startups, right? There is no specific school. Sometimes they were founders themselves or not. They were abroad. They came back to Tunis. It's a mixture of backgrounds. So the question here is like how to train them or how to prepare those profiles to be able to lead such initiatives.
Well, maybe what I can share is, and something that I've seen a little bit is, if it's possible, is to shadow someone in another accelerator. I think that's super helpful. Those jobs and positions in an accelerator are very hands-on, and they also it's doing a lot of different things. So I would say like trying to, as much as possible, to work with the entrepreneurs. You learn a lot by doing as well, right? So be as close as possible to your own community. Be able to like train your team as being as open as possible and helping as well, like just with the giving back mentality, introducing as many people as possible, helping as much as possible, and shadowing if that's possible. Nowadays traveling is a bit more complicated. I mean, you can shadow someone within the Tunisian ecosystem, but if you get the chance to just ask, and people are quite open to if there's one accelerator that they're looking up anywhere, I don't know, you name it, any country, and you reach out to them, you say, look, I'd like for my team member to come and spend 2 weeks with you and follow you. I think that's the best way to learn on how to replicate that locally.
Amazing. Maybe go ahead.
Adding two sentences here. I think one of the stuff I mentioned earlier, it's about how do you recycle entrepreneurs, right? There are serial entrepreneurs. If you manage to build a successful startup, very often they want to give back to the community. So they either continue the journey and just start a next startup. So that's what we call serial entrepreneurs, fantastic people. But there are also people that say like, I made so good experience. Maybe I really want to go back and work for accelerators because I can provide hands-on support. So look for those people again, provide them with opportunities. Also provide them with opportunities for the people that, tried and failed. I think massively lessons learned. Have an open door for them. And the last one goes in a little bit in the direction that Charlotte was mentioning. Also, don't be shy for ask for help. There's so many people out there who are happy to help, right? Just drop them an email, tell them like, hey, you know, how did you do that? Do you have maybe an hour call? Do you have 2 hour calls? Be precise. I think that helps. If you just say like, hey, I need help, then it's kind of like, okay, be precise. That's my challenge. Can you support that? And I'm sure, and I know it for myself, and we are here to help. There are tons of people out there to help. Don't be shy. I think it's not a sign of weakness, it's really a sign of strength, knowing what you're looking for.
We can feed your passion. I love that. I love your passion, both of you, in this session. I personally enjoyed it. I hope also the audience enjoyed it. And for that, like we put for you guys on the platform of eVay in activity, a feedback form. So please share your feedback. We will be sharing that with our speakers today, and make sure to take it into consideration for the next sessions. Thank you so much, both of you. It was a delight. Anything else you want to add, guys, before ending this session? The last word for the Tunisian ecosystem, SSOs out there.
It's the best place to work in an ecosystem, so enjoy the ride.
Amazing.
Likewise, fantastic to be here. I really enjoyed the session, and I think there's never a boring day in ecosystem. Right, it's one of the most dynamic fields. Enjoy it, and I'm sure there will be plenty of stuff. Think about how you can not in the long run, but really pragmatically, how can you foster this trust? How can you foster that collaboration? And all the rest comes naturally.
Thank you so much. Really grateful for having you today with us. We'll make sure to share the feedback both sides. Hope to see you again, maybe collaborating with one of the SSOs or Tunisia, more programs like the ones mentioned earlier. So excited about that. So guys, thank you again for being part of this program or for attending with us today. Tomorrow we will be having a new session. You can check all the details on the same website. Be safe, all of you, and hope to see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Benny and Charlotte.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.